On a blazing summer afternoon in South Chicago, the heat shimmered over the quiet estate. But the silence broke when a woman in a bright red dress stepped out, with two massive German shepherds moving at her sides like trained shadows. Neighbors watched through blinds. No one understood why Isabella Rossi, the city's feared Mafia queen, walked Max and Shadow every afternoon, or why the dogs acted like danger was always nearby. Then both dogs froze. A low growl cut through the heat, and in that tense moment, a little girl in a pastel pink coat appeared on the steps, small, fearless, strangely calm. A long-buried secret began to rise, ready to shake South Chicago. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. South Chicago in midsummer was a world of shimmering heat, wavering air, and the slow hum of cicadas clinging to sunburned trees. The city's edges blurred beneath the glare. Cracked pavement, distant sirens, rusted fences rising like ribs from the earth. And tucked deep inside this sweltering landscape stood the Rossi estate, a sprawling mansion of white stone and black steel, its tall iron gates guarded by armed men who scanned every passing shadow with wary eyes. The weather was brutal that day. The sunlight struck the marble so fiercely, it looked like it would melt. Even so, nothing in Chicago's summer was more intimidating than the estate's unspoken rule: never go near the dogs. Behind the mansion, where manicured hedges framed a wide backyard, two German shepherds patrolled as if they owned the sunlit courtyard. Max, the larger one, was 6 years old, with a broad chest, thick sable fur, and deep amber eyes that held the weariness of a fighter who had seen too much. A fresh scar cut across the bridge of his nose, making him look even more severe. His temperament was sharp, quick to react, slow to trust, and always half a step from lunging if he sensed a threat. Shadow, slightly smaller but leaner and darker, had fur the color of storm clouds and eyes that flickered with intelligence. At 4 years old, he moved with an eerie quietness, as though stalking ghosts only he could see. His past left marks across his body, thin white lines on his neck, a small notch missing from his ear, and though he rarely attacked first, he had a ferocity that surfaced the moment anyone tried to restrain him. Together, Max and Shadow were legends within the estate. Rumor had it they had bitten through steel chains, ripped apart reinforced crates, and chased out every trainer Isabella ever hired. Even the guards, men hardened by street wars and narrow escapes, gave the courtyard a wide berth, muttering prayers when they passed by the windows overlooking the dogs' territory. From the second-floor balcony, Isabella Rossi watched them with a strange mixture of pride and melancholy. Isabella, only 37, was a woman carved from elegance and danger. She had tall, statuesque posture, olive skin with a faint golden sheen, and dark hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her defining feature, besides the aura of authority she wore like perfume, was the iconic red dress she chose every day, silky, figure-hugging, bold enough to match her reputation. People whispered that she wore red to remind the world she wasn't afraid of blood, hers or anyone else's. Her face, striking and symmetrical, carried hints of exhaustion beneath the flawless makeup, like someone who had traded softness for survival long ago. Despite her iron rule over half the city's underground dealings, there was something haunted in the way she gazed at Max and Shadow, a silent recognition, as if she saw her own lone wolf spirit reflected in their mistrustful eyes. That afternoon, as the heat pressed down like a heavy hand, a sleek black SUV rolled up the driveway. The vehicle gleamed under the punishing sun, clearly expensive, clearly armored, clearly belonging to someone with power. The guards straightened, hands hovering over holsters. The driver stepped out, a tall, heavy-set man in his late 50s, wearing a gray suit that clung to his shoulders in the heat. His name was Anthony Parker, one of Isabella's longest-standing business associates. He had a square jaw, a salt-and-pepper beard trimmed with military precision, and thoughtful blue eyes that always looked a bit sad. Anthony had once been a kind man, but years of losing friends, clients, and even family to the brutal world of organized power had molded him into someone quiet, calculating, and colder than he appeared at first glance. From the back seat emerged a smaller figure, Lily Parker, Anthony's 7-year-old granddaughter. Lily was a tiny splash of color against the estate's sharp lines, wearing her soft pastel pink coat, blue jeans, and little brown boots that tapped lightly on the marble driveway. She clutched a worn teddy bear under one arm. Lily had curly honey blonde hair that caught the sunlight, cheeks still round with childhood, and wide hazel eyes that drank in every detail around her. Despite her youth, she carried a gentle seriousness, an awareness unusual for a child, forged from months of quiet sadness after losing her parents in an accident. Anthony brought her everywhere now, unable to leave her with strangers, and she moved through the world with a kind of fragile bravery. As Anthony greeted Isabella in the grand foyer, Lily drifted toward a long glass hallway. The corridor overlooked the courtyard, and as she pressed her small palm to the cool glass, she spotted Max and Shadow lying in the grass, two massive shapes half submerged in sunlight. Most people would have stepped back, but Lily tilted her head in curiosity. To her, the dogs didn't look dangerous. They looked alone. Max's eyes, half closed, flicked upward at the sound of her tapping boots. Then Shadow's. The two dogs rose simultaneously, muscles rippling under glossy fur, and stared back at her with a piercing, almost human intensity. For a fleeting heartbeat, the world shrank to the space between them, the child in pink and the wolves of the Rossi estate. A guard hurried up, pulling Lily gently away. "Don't get close, sweetheart," he whispered urgently. "They're extremely dangerous." But as Lily allowed herself to be led away, she stole one last glance at the dogs and thought, "They look like someone forgot to love them." That night, the mansion buzzed with an important meeting. Adults filled the halls, voices low, footsteps brisk. Lily wandered quietly, teddy bear in hand, searching for the bathroom she'd been told about. The hallways twisted in endless patterns, mirrors, sconces, long carpets that swallowed sound. She turned, left instead of right, then right instead of left, and suddenly found herself standing before a heavy wooden door she didn't recognize. The air behind it felt cooler, drifting in faint currents under the threshold. She reached out. Her small fingers brushed the cold doorknob. A soft click echoed in the silent corridor. The door had unlocked. The door eased open with a soft sigh, and Lily stepped into the courtyard, swallowed instantly by the warm glow of the late summer sunset. The sky hovered between gold and orange, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Her pink coat, though meant for cooler weather, stood out vividly against the deep green of the grass, making her look like a small lantern in a field of dusk. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind her, sealing Lily alone in the open air. Max was the first to notice her, his ears flicking, muscles tightening under his thick sable fur. He rose with a growl that rolled from deep in his chest, his massive frame shifting from stillness to tension in one smooth motion. His tail stiffened, his back arched high, and his amber eyes sharpened like twin blades. Shadow followed a second later, lifting himself gracefully despite the faint stiffness in his scarred shoulder. His darker coat drank in the fading sunlight, making him appear almost like a living shadow cast across the grass. Unlike Max's raw aggression, Shadow's instinctive step backward and the tilt of his head showed confusion, hesitation, and something else flickering beneath. A memory trying to surface. Lily stood motionless, her tiny frame fragile before the two giant dogs. Her breath trembled for one heartbeat, but her hands remained steady as she clutched her worn teddy bear. There was fear. Any child would feel it. But what filled her gaze more strongly was sympathy. She looked at Max's scars, at Shadow's tremor, and her voice came out soft as falling cotton. "You're hurting, aren't you?" Her words drifted across the courtyard like a forgotten lullaby. Max's growl faltered. Shadow's ears twitched, and his body lowered slightly. Not submissively, but cautiously, as though he recognized something familiar in her tone. Inside the mansion, a security guard monitoring the cameras jolted upright. This was Rafael Cruz, a man in his early 40s with a wiry build, sun-leathered skin, and dark eyes sharpened by 15 years of private security work. He kept his black hair tied tightly behind his head and wore a trimmed beard that gave him a stern, stoic appearance. Raphael was level-headed under pressure, shaped by a past incident where he failed to react fast enough during a burglary, resulting in the injury of a young co-worker he had sworn to protect. Since then, he had carried a quiet vow: never hesitate again. And now, seeing Lily, a child, standing before Max and Shadow, he slammed his hand on the alarm button without a second thought. Sirens blared. Red lights pulsed across the marble hallways. Guards scrambled from every direction. Raphael grabbed a tranquilizer shotgun, bolting down the staircase, his boots pounding against the cold stone. He yelled orders into his radio, his voice edged with panic. "Child in the courtyard! Eyes on the shepherds! Move!" On the second floor, Isabella Rossi stepped out onto the balcony, her red dress catching the evening light like fire. She gripped the railing with manicured fingers, her posture sharp and commanding. Her height and poise gave her a queen-like silhouette, dangerous, unyielding, and beautiful in a way that intimidated more than it charmed. Yet as she saw Lily alone in the grass, facing down the two wolves Isabella had built her fortress around, something deep within her tightened. Isabella moved closer to the edge, her dark hair rippling in the heat-thickened breeze, eyes narrowing with both calculation and concern. Down below, Lily took another step, not away, but closer. The teddy bear dangled from her arm. The dogs watched her with held breath. Max's snarl returned for an instant, but softer this time, as though instinct, not desire, pushed it forth. Shadow lowered his head, nostrils flaring, taking in Lily's scent. The faint aroma of soap, cotton, and something else he couldn't quite place but felt inexplicably drawn to. Lily whispered, "I won't hurt you." Her voice was barely more than a breath, yet Max's tail dipped a fraction, indecisive. She slowly extended her free hand, small, open, and unthreatening. A moth fluttered between them, brushing against her sleeve, but she didn't flinch. Her stillness sent an unfamiliar ripple through Max's rigid stance. Raphael burst from the back door and sprinted across the grass, pumping the tranquilizer shotgun. Sweat beaded on his temples despite the fading heat. He skidded to a stop 20 feet behind Lily, raising the gun with both hands, fingers straining the trigger. "Stay back!" he shouted, breath ragged. Lily didn't turn around. She kept her hand extended toward Max. The dogs didn't react to Raphael. They were locked solely on the girl. More guards spilled into the courtyard, a half-dozen men forming a wide semicircle, weapons trained, breaths held. One of them, Mark Jensen, a young recruit with sandy hair and an anxious tremor in his posture, swallowed hard. It was his third week on the job. He'd never seen the dogs up close, and fear flickered across his blue eyes as Max growled again. Isabella raised a single hand from the balcony. The guards froze instantly. Her authority cracked through the chaos like thunder. Her voice, cool and unwavering, drifted through the air. "Don't shoot." Below, Max took a slow, deliberate step toward Lily. His lips were lifted just enough to show teeth, but his eyes, those fierce, scarred eyes, held no malice, only warning, only fear. Raphael tightened his grip. "Ma'am, she's in danger." "Hold," Isabella commanded, the single word slicing the courtyard into silence. Lily exhaled softly and stepped backward, straight toward Max instead of away. Her small hand remained outstretched, trembling but brave. Max's head lowered an inch, drawn forward by something far older than training or instinct. Raphael's finger curled around the trigger. Max growled. Lily whispered, "It's okay." And Isabella, her gaze sharp as a blade, said quietly from above, "Not yet. Don't fire. Not yet." The courtyard had fallen into a trembling quiet. The alarms were fading, the guards frozen in a tense semicircle, and the heat of the Chicago evening thickened the air like syrup. Lily lowered herself slowly onto the warm grass, her pink coat brushing the ground, creating a tiny island of softness between two creatures that had never known gentleness. She sat cross-legged, her teddy bear resting in her lap, and extended her small hand toward the German shepherds, as though offering a bridge made only of trust and childhood innocence. Her voice drifted out, light, warm, and strangely steady. "Once upon a time," she began, "there were two brave dogs. No one understood that they weren't angry. Their hearts were just trying to stay safe." Max's growl softened into a low rumble. His ears twitched. The rigid line of his spine loosened as he inched closer, nose dipping toward the little girl sitting fearlessly before him. Shadow followed with a quieter movement, lowering his head until the scars on his neck caught the sunset light. They were jagged, pale lines that looked almost like old lightning marks, some thin, some thick, some long, and Lily's brows pinched with recognition. "These scars," she whispered, brushing her fingers gently over her teddy bear rather than touching the dog directly. "I've seen ones just like them before." Max sniffed the air around Lily, picking up the familiar faint scent of childhood, cotton, soap, and something that stirred an old buried memory he didn't know he remembered. Shadow's tail flicked once, not in warning, but in indecision, like he was trying to reconcile the image of the pink-coated child in front of him with someone lost in the past. Inside the mansion, Isabella Rossi was in the strategy room, surrounded by her senior lieutenants. It was a dim marble chamber lit by recessed golden lamps that cast shadows across the long oak table. The men around her, hardened from years in the criminal underworld, looked uneasy, exchanging glances as they whispered updates about security breaches in the city. Their voices stilled when Marco D'Angelo, Isabella's right-hand lieutenant, approached her with a tablet in hand. Marco was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, with shoulders like stone and deep-set hazel eyes dulled by years of violence. His hair was shaved close to the scalp, and a long scar stretched from his left brow down his cheek, a reminder of a betrayal years ago that had turned him merciless toward weakness. "Boss," he said, voice gravelly from old cigarette addiction. "You need to see this." Isabella, still radiating composure in her fitted red dress, took the tablet. The screen displayed live footage from the courtyard. Lily sitting in the grass, Max and Shadow standing only inches away, not attacking. Isabella's expression froze, shock flickering beneath her normally flawless mask. "Impossible," she murmured. "No one has ever—" Her voice trailed off as Max's muzzle lowered a fraction toward Lily. Disbelief mixed with irritation. She dismissed the room with a flick of her fingers and strode quickly toward her private office. She walked with long, sharp steps, red fabric whispering around her calves. Once inside, she closed the door and dialed a number she hadn't touched in years. After 3 rings, a rough voice answered. "Isabella? Didn't expect to hear from you." The voice belonged to Earl Donovan, a man in his late 50s with a reputation as one of the most ruthless underground dog brokers in the Midwest. Earl had a gaunt face, gray stubble covering a sharp jaw, and pale blue eyes that never showed remorse. Years of dealing with blood sport and illegal fighting rings had stripped him of softness. People described him as someone who looked carved from desert bone. The last time Isabella had worked with Earl, she purchased Max and Shadow from him, though she had never asked where they came from. Until now. "Tell me everything about their past," she demanded. Earl chuckled dryly. "Those two? Bad history, Isabella. Brutal place. They were fighters, undefeated, but unpredictable. Would tear through restraints, go after handlers. What about their early years?" Isabella cut in sharply. Earl paused. "Funny thing, there was a kid, some tiny girl who sneaked into the kennels every day, wore this old pink jacket. The dogs calmed for her. Only her. If she wasn't there, they'd tear the place apart. Cops raided the operation. Girl got picked up. Some wealthy family adopted her. The dogs were sold around, eventually landed with you." Isabella's fingers tightened around the phone. Pink coat, fearless child, familiar tone. Every detail matched the girl currently in her courtyard. Lily Parker wasn't just soothing Max and Shadow. She was remembered by them. When the call ended, Isabella moved to the window overlooking the courtyard. Night had fully draped itself over the estate, warm and heavy. Below, Max and Shadow lay side by side near the door Lily had slipped through earlier, their bodies motionless except for the slow rise and fall of their breaths. They were positioned like guardians, awaiting the return of someone precious. Lily had been escorted back to the guest lounge after the incident, checked by the estate's medic, and tucked safely under Anthony Parker's watch. But her presence still pulsed through the night air, unsettling the rhythms of the household. Isabella stood there, unmoving, staring down at the courtyard. Her hand slid into the drawer beside her, wrapping around the cool steel of a small pistol. She lifted it halfway, letting the weight test her resolve. Max and Shadow's loyalty to Lily could be a strength or a fatal vulnerability. And Isabella Rossi, Queen of Steel and Shadow, was not a woman who tolerated vulnerabilities. The barrel of the gun glinted faintly in the moonlight as she contemplated. Below, Max lifted his head, ears pricked toward Lily's last known direction. Shadow followed, leaning against his brother like an ancient oath rekindled. Isabella's grip tightened. 2 wolves, 1 child, 1 truth she could no longer ignore, and 1 decision that could change everything. Night settled over South Chicago, with a kind of heavy, breathless heat that clung to the skin like invisible fingers. The Rossi estate, usually glowing with warm golden lights, sat beneath the summer sky looking more like a sleeping beast, all stone, steel, and shadows. But tonight, those shadows felt stretched thin, trembling with an unspoken warning. Rumors had begun to slip through the underworld like poisonous threads. The Mafia queen's wolves now bowed for a child. Enemies smelled weakness, and weakness in this world was a spark waiting for a lit match. Lily wandered the courtyard, unaware of the political storm gathering beyond the mansion walls. She laughed softly as she straddled Shadow's broad back, small hands tangled in his dark fur. Shadow stood still, patient and proud, his storm-colored coat gleaming under the backlights that illuminated the gardens at night. At 4 years old, his strength was at its peak, coiled muscle, sharp reflexes, and eyes that glimmered like old secrets. Max circled them, tail alert, watching every shift of the wind. At 6 years old, he was bulkier, broader, a living fortress with scars carved from past battles. He moved like a guardian carved from iron, silent, watchful, and ready to die for the child they had once lost and somehow found again. Lily's giggles floated through the air as she declared, "Shadow is the knight. Max is the royal guard captain." The dogs responded as though they understood perfectly, Shadow standing tall beneath her and Max trotting in a protective arc. For a brief moment, the knight felt innocent. Inside the mansion, Isabella Rossi stood barefoot on marble floors in her private office. Her red dress shimmered under the chandelier, looking almost liquid in the soft light. She reread a message delivered minutes earlier. A blurry photograph of Lily with Max and Shadow, sent anonymously, with a single line beneath it. "Your empire has cracks." Isabella's jaw clenched. Her heart hardened. Whoever sent it wanted her rattled. They wanted her afraid. But fear had been burned out of her a long time ago. She slipped on a pair of ruby-studded earrings, the ones she wore only during confrontation, when the night promised blood. As she stepped toward the balcony, she passed her security coordinator, Damon Keller, in the hallway. Damon was a tall man in his late 30s, with a square jaw and thick, dark eyebrows that always seemed locked in a permanent scowl. His buzz-cut hair and muscular build made him look like a soldier carved from concrete. He had once served in the Marines, but left after watching his closest friend die beside him in a failed operation, a trauma that left him fiercely protective and dangerously reactive. "Perimeter's normal," Damon reported, though a tightness in his voice betrayed unease. "But something feels off tonight." Isabella nodded, her heels clicking like small explosions on the polished floor. "Stay sharp." She stepped out, to the balcony, just as the lights across the estate flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the gardens. For half a second, silence smothered everything. Then the alarms screamed to life. A blast of light burst from the fences behind the property, sparks flying as if someone had sliced through the security grid. Damon's voice cracked across every radio. "Multiple hostiles breaching the rear perimeter, armed!" Lily jerked her head up in confusion, just as the first gunshot shattered a window somewhere inside the mansion. The sound ricocheted across the courtyard like thunder. Max reacted instantly, ears flattening, body whipping toward the noise, a snarl ripping from deep inside him. Shadow braced himself, shifting Lily off his back and nudging her fiercely toward the nearest stone wall. Glass exploded in a shower of jagged stars. Voices shouted, guards yelling orders, attackers shouting back. The garden lights flickered alive again, casting harsh beams across the chaos. Lily pressed back against the wall, the stone warm behind her. Max sprinted across the courtyard, barking with explosive force, his movements sharp and decisive. Shadow planted himself in front of Lily, widening his stance, teeth bared, fur rising along his spine. Isabella appeared on the balcony above, illuminated by the lights, a crimson figure framed against the chaos. She held a sleek black pistol, lightweight but deadly, and her arms were steady despite the pandemonium below. "Take positions," she commanded, voice cold and metallic. The guards scrambled to obey, forming defensive lines, but Isabella's eyes never left the courtyard. Max lunged at a masked intruder who had breached the side door, a man with a wiry frame, sweat-slick hair, and a tattoo curling up his neck. He looked like someone who'd lived on adrenaline and spite his whole life. Max slammed into him with a fury that knocked the weapon from the man's grip. Another attacker spotted Lily, his gaunt face twisted with recognition, or maybe opportunity. He raised his gun. Lily gasped. Shadow moved first, launching forward in a blur of dark fur, shoving Lily behind his body, just as Max spun around with a roar fit for a beast twice his size. The attacker steadied his aim. Max lowered his head, muscles coiling. Everything seemed to slow. Lily screamed, "Max! Shadow!" A deafening crack split the night. Isabella leaped from the balcony, red dress snapping behind her, gun raised, eyes blazing, with absolute intent, and the world erupted into gunfire. Morning unfolded slowly over South Chicago, the first rays of sun filtering through the thick canopy of oaks that bordered the Rossi estate. The heat of the night had cooled enough to allow a gentle warmth to seep over the grass, painting the courtyard in soft gold. The chaos of the attack had been washed away by dawn. The shattered glass swept aside, the alarm silenced, the metallic scent of gunpowder replaced by summer's stillness. In the center of the courtyard, the aftermath lay quietly, almost tenderly. Max, the elder German shepherd, rested on his side with his front leg wrapped in clean white bandages. His powerful frame, 6 years of muscle, scars, and survival, seemed softer now as he breathed in slow, even rhythm. Beside him was Shadow, younger and wounded at the shoulder, a strip of gauze peeking through his dark fur. Though injured, both dogs held an air of solemn pride, as if the night's violence had not broken them but revealed their true nature. Nestled between them was Lily, curled like a small sunbeam in her pink coat, her cheek resting against Shadow's thick fur while her hand remained tangled in Max's ruff. Her brown boots poked out from under her legs, still dusted with last night's debris. Her tiny chest rose and fell steadily, deeply asleep, finally safe. The courtyard felt like sacred ground. A few yards away, Dr. Margot Hill, the estate's medic, finished packing her supplies. Margot was a woman in her mid-50s with short, silver-streaked hair and warm brown skin, her round glasses slipping down her nose every time she moved too quickly. She had a compact build, the kind of sturdiness that came from decades of lifting stretchers and tending to the wounded. Known for her gentle hands and blunt honesty, Margot had stitched up more bullet wounds than she cared to count. She gave Lily a final, relieved look before exiting quietly, leaving the scene untouched. Isabella arrived moments later. She stepped barefoot across the grass, her iconic red dress rippling in the mild morning breeze. For once, the expression on her face did not match the cold, steel reputation that made criminals tremble. Her dark eyes softened when she reached Lily. She lowered herself slowly, kneeling until the fabric of her dress spread over the lawn like a crimson tide. Max lifted his head weakly. His amber eyes flickered between caution and recognition. Then he relaxed. He trusted her now. Shadow's tail made the slightest thump against the grass. Isabella reached out and gently brushed a strand of blonde hair away from Lily's forehead. Her voice, usually sharp as glass, came out hushed. "You know," she murmured, "they've never protected anyone like that." Lily stirred, her lashes fluttering open. For a moment she looked disoriented. Then she smiled. A small, weary, radiant smile. Her voice was soft, but its truth struck Isabella like a physical blow. "Maybe," Lily whispered, "because no one ever protected them before." The words pierced through years of hardened armor. Isabella inhaled sharply. She had built her empire on dominance, fear, and absolute control. Never kindness, never trust. But in one night, a child had accomplished what power could not. She had shifted the hearts of beasts, and of a woman who had forgotten what softness felt like. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes rippled through the Rossi estate. Isabella became a ghost in her own underworld. Meetings were canceled, operations stalled, and financial records were quietly shifted. She contacted her accountant, Julian Reed, a slender man in his early 40s with dark hair always tied neatly at the nape of his neck, pale gray eyes behind thin spectacles, and a smooth manner that masked a calculating mind. Julian had once lost a younger brother to gang violence, and beneath his polished exterior lived a quiet desire to dismantle the world that had taken so much from him. Under Isabella's silent orders, he began redirecting funds, millions of dollars, into shelters for abused animals, after-school programs for vulnerable children, and mental health services across the city. Rumors spread. The Mafia queen had changed. Some laughed. Some panicked. A few plotted. But those closest to her saw the truth. A pink-coated child and two battered wolves had rewritten her destiny. Summer deepened. The estate, once known for its coldness and strict boundaries, warmed. Lily stayed as an honored guest, invited back anytime she wished. Anthony Parker, still grieving and protective, agreed reluctantly after witnessing how Max and Shadow hovered around Lily like her personal guardians. The dogs healed quickly, their scars no longer symbols of violence but of survival and loyalty. Lily spent her days running through the gardens, her laughter echoing through the stone walls. Her pink coat fluttered behind her like a banner of hope while Max trotted beside her with measured steps, and Shadow bounded playfully ahead, his dark fur catching sunlight like silver threads. The guards, men hardened and scarred themselves, found their edges softening too as they watched this unlikely trio weave joy into a place once defined by danger. One evening, exactly 1 year later, during the second summer, Isabella stepped onto her balcony. The air was warm and full of the smell of flowers blooming late. Her red dress glowed under the garden lights as she looked down into the courtyard. Below, Lily was kneeling in the grass, arms wrapped around Max's thick neck, while Shadow sprawled beside them, chin resting on her lap. All three looked content, complete, as if they had always belonged together. A breeze lifted Isabella's dark hair. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, a true smile touched her lips. Soft, unarmed, human. In that moment, everything shifted. The wolves she had once feared were guardians now. The child she had once seen as a liability had become her compass, and Isabella Rossi, Mafia queen clad in red, finally understood that power meant nothing without connection. Love had rebuilt what violence tried to destroy. and a little girl in a pink coat had stitched together the heart of a woman who thought she no longer had one. Sometimes, in the hardest corners of our world, where fear reigns, where people hide behind armor, and where wounds run deeper than the eye can see, grace finds a way through. It doesn't always arrive as thunder or lightning. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the form of a little girl in a pink coat, a pair of wounded wolves, or a woman who finally remembers she still has a heart. Moments like these remind us that miracles aren't always loud. Sometimes God works through the gentlest hands, through innocence that refuses to be broken, and through love that refuses to give up. And if a Mafia queen, two battered German shepherds, and a lonely little girl can find healing in the middle of a violent night, then maybe you and I can find healing too, in our families, in our communities, and in the places we least expect. So as you close this story, may the Lord bless you, protect you, and open your eyes to the quiet miracles happening around you every day. Hold your loved ones close. Forgive where you can, and believe, truly believe, that no heart is too hard for God to soften. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next tale of redemption, courage, and God's quiet wonders. May God bless you and keep you, and may your days be filled with grace, compassion, and the gentle miracles that change lives.